Pastor Mark Thompson slammed his fist against the pulpit as the congregation erupted in cheers. They love this, he thought, watching 500 faces beam with approval as he tore apart Catholic devotion to Mary. The visiting Martinez family near the back shifted uncomfortably in their seats, their faces growing paler with each mocking word. "Blessed Mother," he sneered into the microphone, drawing out the words like poison. They pray to a dead woman instead of the living Christ. They bow down to statues like pagans worshiping golden calves. The crowd roared its agreement, several members shouting amen and "Preach it, Pastor." Mrs. Martinez gathered her children close, tears streaming down her weathered cheeks as Thompson's voice boomed through the sanctuary. This is what happens when tradition replaces truth, when ritual becomes idol worship. They've made Mary into a goddess, folks, a false goddess. The Martinez family stood abruptly, their chairs scraping against the floor as they hurried toward the exit. Thompson watched them flee with satisfaction, his voice never faltering. Let them run back to their candles and their rosaries. We'll keep preaching the real gospel here. The congregation was on its feet now, applauding thunderously as Thompson raised both hands in triumph. Another successful defense of biblical truth against Catholic deception. His reputation as the region's most fearless evangelical warrior was growing stronger each week, and the crowds kept coming to hear him expose religious error wherever he found it. Thompson's voice reached fever pitch as he gripped the microphone stand. "And this so-called Virgin Mary," he shouted, spittle flying from his lips, "she's nothing but a dead woman who can't hear your prayers, can't answer your cries, can't save your souls." The congregation was mesmerized, hanging on every blasphemous word. Mary is powerless, folks, powerless and worthless for salvation. Anyone who thinks otherwise is deceived by. The words died in his throat as absolute darkness consumed his vision. Not the gradual dimming of failing sight, but instant, complete blackness that struck like a physical blow. Thompson stumbled backward, his hands flying to his face, fingers desperately clawing at his eyes. "I can't see," he gasped into the microphone, his voice cracking with terror. The congregation fell silent, their cheers dying into shocked whispers. "Something's wrong. I can't see anything." Pastor Thompson collapsed behind the pulpit, his confident swagger replaced by helpless fumbling in the dark. The sanctuary erupted into chaos as deacons rushed forward and women screamed. Someone called 911 while others began praying frantically, their voices mixing into a cacophony of panic. Through it all, Thompson lay curled on the platform floor, his hands pressed against eyes that saw nothing but impenetrable blackness. The man who had spent the last hour mocking divine intervention had become its undeniable victim, struck blind before 500 witnesses who would never forget what they had seen. Dr. Susan Mitchell stared at the test results in bewilderment, her medical training unable to explain what she was seeing. Every scan, every examination, every possible diagnostic test had come back completely normal. Pastor Thompson's eyes showed no physical damage, no neurological dysfunction, no reason for his total blindness. "There's nothing medically wrong with your vision," she told Thompson as he sat rigidly in a hospital bed, his wife Karen clutching his trembling hand. "Your optic nerves are perfect, your brain scans are clear, your retinas are healthy. I've never seen anything like this." The news spread through their small town like wildfire. At Sacred Heart Catholic Church across town, Father Rodriguez led an emergency prayer vigil, his parishioners kneeling before the statue of Mary that Thompson had so viciously mocked just hours earlier. Many of the Martinez family's tears had dried, replaced by quiet prayers for their tormentor's healing. But it wasn't just Catholics praying. Word reached every denomination in the county, creating an unprecedented wave of intercession. Even those who had cheered Thompson's anti-Catholic sermons now whispered nervously about divine judgment and supernatural intervention. Thompson himself remained stubbornly defiant despite his terror. "This is just stress," he insisted to anyone who would listen, his voice hollow in the darkness that now defined his world. "Medical condition." temporary blindness from exhaustion. But deep in his heart, where pride couldn't quite reach, he knew better. He knew exactly when his sight had vanished, and he knew why. The following Sunday's service drew barely 200 people. The empty pews a stark reminder of Thompson's fallen status. Many longtime members had quietly slipped away, uncomfortable with the supernatural implications of their pastor's condition. Others whispered in the parking lot about God's judgment and wondered if they had been following false teaching. "Mark, please," Karen pleaded as she helped him navigate their darkened bedroom. "Just consider that maybe God is trying to tell you something. The Catholic families are praying for you. Maybe you should apologize." Thompson's jaw clenched as he fumbled for his water glass. "I won't apologize for preaching biblical truth. This blindness is temporary. Medical. Nothing more." But his voice lacked its former conviction, hollowed out by 3 weeks of stumbling through a world he could no longer see. The church board met without him for the first time in 15 years. Deacon Williams suggested bringing in a substitute pastor while Thompson recovered. Others wondered aloud if recovery was even possible, given the circumstances of his affliction. The unanimous decision was whispered reluctantly: indefinite leave of absence. At home, their 12-year-old daughter Emma watched her father with frightened eyes. "Daddy," she asked quietly one evening, "why won't you just say sorry to God about what you said?" Even she understood what the adults refused to acknowledge. The most powerful man in her world had been reduced to helpless dependency, groping through darkness while his family watched him crumble. The screech of brakes and shattering glass pierced the afternoon quiet as Emma's bicycle collided with a delivery truck just outside their home. Thompson heard his daughter scream from inside the house, his blood turning to ice as he stumbled desperately toward the front door. "Emma," he shouted, crashing into furniture as he fought through the darkness. His hands found the doorknob, but once outside, his blindness rendered him completely helpless. He could hear her crying, could smell gasoline and burning rubber, but couldn't find her in the chaos. "Someone help me," he pleaded, his voice breaking as neighbors rushed past him toward the accident scene. "I can't see her. I can't help my own daughter." The man who had commanded respect from hundreds now stood paralyzed on his own front lawn, reduced to begging strangers for assistance. Mrs. Martinez appeared at his side, her gentle hands guiding him toward Emma's voice. "She's conscious, Pastor," the woman he had humiliated whispered. "Broken leg, but she's going to be okay." Her husband was already loading Emma into their car for the hospital run, while Karen fumbled for her keys with shaking hands. In the emergency room, Thompson sat helplessly in a plastic chair, while Catholic neighbors he had publicly mocked coordinated his family's crisis. They called doctors, filled out paperwork, brought coffee, and prayed quietly in Spanish over Emma's hospital bed. His blindness had stripped away every ounce of his former self-sufficiency, leaving him completely dependent on the mercy of those he had wounded. Thompson sat alone in his study at 2 in the morning, his world nothing but impenetrable darkness and the weight of his shattered pride. Emma was home from the hospital, her leg in a cast, cared for by neighbors whose faith he had ridiculed. His congregation had abandoned him. His family watched him with pity and fear. "God," he whispered into the blackness, his voice cracking with desperation. "I don't understand what's happening to me. I can't see. I can't help anyone. I can't even take care of my own child." His hands trembled as tears streamed down his cheeks. "If this is you, if this is real, then please help me." A gentle warmth filled the room, accompanied by the soft scent of roses that had no earthly source. Thompson felt a presence beside him, maternal and infinitely compassionate. His heart hammered against his ribs as a voice spoke, clear and loving in the darkness. "Mark," the voice said, and he knew with absolute certainty who was speaking. "Your eyes have been closed for much longer than a month. You have wounded my children with your words, driven them from love with your hatred. I'm sorry," he gasped, falling to his knees beside his desk chair. "Mary, I'm so sorry. I was wrong about everything. Please forgive me." The presence drew closer, and he felt a hand touch his forehead with infinite tenderness. Your sight will return, she said softly, but first you must truly see. See my love for all my children. See the unity I desire among believers. See how your pride has blinded you to grace. Thompson woke the next morning with tears still wet on his cheeks and something impossible happening in his eyes. Faint shapes moved in the darkness, blurred outlines where there had been nothing but black void for weeks. He blinked repeatedly, afraid to hope, afraid to believe what he was experiencing. "Karen," he whispered, reaching for his wife's sleeping form. "Karen, I think I can see light." She bolted upright as he pointed toward their bedroom window, where the golden edge of sunrise was becoming visible to him for the first time in a month. By noon, his vision had cleared enough to make out faces, though everything remained soft and hazy like looking through frosted glass. The first thing he truly focused on was the small wooden cross hanging above their bed, and he wept at the sight of it. How had he forgotten that faith was supposed to be about love, not division? Emma hobbled into his study on her crutches, her eyes wide with wonder as her father actually looked at her, really saw her, for the first time since his blindness began. "Daddy, you can see me," she breathed, and he gathered her carefully into his arms. But it was the image that appeared in his peripheral vision that stopped his heart completely. There, standing quietly in the corner of his study where she had spoken to him in the darkness, was a woman in flowing blue robes, her hands clasped in prayer, her face radiant with compassion. Mary smiled at him once before fading away, leaving him with the absolute certainty that divine mercy had saved his sight and his soul. Thompson stood outside Sacred Heart Catholic Church for 20 minutes before finding the courage to push open the heavy wooden doors. His vision, still tender and adjusting, took in the stained glass windows he had never bothered to appreciate before. The statue of Mary near the altar seemed to glow in the afternoon light filtering through the sanctuary. Father Rodriguez looked up from his prayer book with surprise as Thompson approached the front pew. "Pastor Thompson," he said quietly, rising from his kneeling position, "I heard about your sight returning. Praise be to God." "Father, I need to ask your forgiveness," Thompson began, his voice barely above a whisper. "What I said about your faith, about Mary, about your people, it was wrong. Sinfully wrong. I was blinded by pride long before God struck me physically blind." The priest's weathered face softened with compassion as Thompson continued. The Martinez family entered for evening prayers just as Thompson was finishing his confession. Mrs. Martinez gasped when she saw him there, her hands flying to her mouth. Thompson turned toward them, his restored eyes bright with tears. "I owe you the deepest apology," he said, walking toward the family he had humiliated. "You came to worship with us, and I drove you away with hatred. Your faith sustained you, while mine destroyed others. Can you ever forgive me?" Mr. Martinez stepped forward, his own eyes glistening, and embraced the man who had once been his tormentor. "We forgive you, Pastor," he said simply. "We have been praying for your healing from the very night you lost your sight." 6 months after his healing, Thompson stood before the packed community center addressing the largest interfaith gathering their town had ever seen. His transformed preaching now focused entirely on unity, grace, and the dangers of religious pride. The story of his supernatural blindness and restoration had become a powerful testimony that drew believers from every denomination within 50 miles. "We've established something beautiful here," he said, gesturing toward the diverse crowd of Baptists, Catholics, Methodists, and Pentecostals who now work together regularly. "Our joint food bank feeds 300 families monthly. Our shared homeless shelter has housed over 200 souls this year alone. This is what happens when we stop fighting each other and start serving together." Father Rodriguez nodded approvingly from the front row, his partnership with Thompson having blossomed into genuine friendship. The Martinez family sat beside Thompson's own family. Their children playing together after services had become a weekly tradition. Mrs. Martinez had become Karen's closest confidant, teaching her about Catholic traditions while learning evangelical hymns in return. "The Blessed Mother appeared to me in my darkest hour," Thompson continued, no longer ashamed to share the supernatural details of his encounter. She showed me that all believers are her children, Protestant and Catholic alike. She called us to unity, not division. The crowd listened in rapt attention as he described Mary's message of love conquering religious hatred. Every week brought new miracles of reconciliation as Thompson's ministry expanded beyond their small town, touching hearts hardened by decades of denominational warfare and showing them a path toward Christian unity through shared service and mutual respect. Dr. William Hayes, the denominational superintendent, arrived with a briefcase full of concerns and a mandate to investigate Thompson's theological drift. He had heard disturbing reports about Catholic cooperation, Marian apparitions, and what some called dangerous ecumenical compromise. His intention was clear: either bring Thompson back to Orthodox Evangelical doctrine or remove him from ministry entirely. "This is exactly what I was afraid of," Hayes muttered as he watched Thompson and Father Rodriguez pray together before the evening food distribution. "Protestant pastors don't collaborate with Catholic priests, Mark. You're confusing the gospel message and leading people into error." But Hayes's skepticism began cracking as he witnessed the evening's events unfold. A homeless veteran with severe PTSD, who had been violent and unreachable for months, broke down weeping as Thompson and several Catholic volunteers prayed over him. The man's rage simply melted away, replaced by supernatural peace that had no natural explanation. Then came the moment that shattered Hayes's resistance completely. As they were closing the shelter for the night, a woman in blue appeared at the far end of the serving line, her presence unmistakable to everyone present. She blessed the remaining food with a simple gesture, and what should have been enough for 20 people somehow fed 60 more families who arrived unexpectedly. Hayes stood frozen, watching the impossible multiplication of resources while Thompson smiled peacefully beside him. "You're seeing what I see now, aren't you?" Thompson asked quietly. "This isn't about theology anymore. It's about love made manifest." The superintendent's briefcase of complaints suddenly seemed irrelevant compared to the miracle unfolding before his eyes. 5 years later, the annual Unity service had become a pilgrimage destination for believers seeking healing from religious division. Thompson, now fully restored and humble in his ministry, stood before 2,000 people representing 47 different denominations, all gathered to commemorate the night divine intervention had transformed their community forever. Emma, now 17 and planning to study theology, served as youth coordinator for the interfaith ministry that had grown from her father's miraculous encounter. The Martinez family had become extended family to the Thompsons, their children considering each other siblings bound by shared witness of supernatural grace. Dr. Hayes, completely transformed by what he had experienced, now traveled nationwide, sharing testimony about denominational reconciliation and the power of divine mercy to heal religious hatred. His own denomination had embraced the unity model, establishing similar interfaith partnerships across 3 states. As the service concluded, Thompson offered the same invitation he had given for 5 years. "Every person here carries wounds from religious division," he said gently. "Some of you have been hurt by people who claim to speak for God, but spoke only hatred. Others have done the hurting yourselves, as I did. But divine grace can heal every wound, bridge every gap, restore every broken relationship." The statue of Mary at the front of the sanctuary seemed to glow in the evening light as Thompson concluded his message. If this story has touched your heart, if you have experienced forgiveness that changed everything, or if you have witnessed grace transform someone who seemed beyond hope, share your story. The world needs to know that mercy still works miracles, that love still conquers division, that healing is always possible. 2 weeks after his tearful reconciliation with the Martinez family, Thompson stood nervously before a packed sanctuary that housed both his evangelical congregation and the entire Sacred Heart Parish. The joint worship service had been his idea, but now facing the mixed crowd of believers who had witnessed his fall and restoration, his hands trembled as he approached the shared pulpit. Father Rodriguez placed a reassuring hand on Thompson's shoulder as they stood together before the altar, Protestant and Catholic clergy united for the first time in their town's history. The symbolism was not lost on anyone present as Thompson began his public confession. I stand before you tonight as a man broken and rebuilt by divine mercy, he said, his voice carrying clearly through the hushed sanctuary. I used this platform to spread hatred between Christians, to mock faith traditions that honor the same Christ we all serve. I was struck blind, not just in body, but in spirit, and I needed supernatural intervention to see the truth. The congregation listened in rapt silence as Thompson described his encounter with Mary, his voice strong and unwavering despite the magnitude of his admission. She appeared to me as a mother grieving for her divided children, calling us back to unity through love rather than separation through doctrine. Catholic and Protestant, we are all her children, all beloved of the same God. Mrs. Martinez wept openly as Thompson concluded his testimony, the very woman he had humiliated now witnessing his complete transformation. The service ended with both congregations praying together, their voices joining in harmony that had seemed impossible just months before.